Hi, we're about to start our webinar looking at AP automation trends of 2022. We'll be looking at the research, offering comparisons with what's been going on and what's taking off. People are just joining us now, so we'll give them a couple of minutes to get here. If you'd like to say hi and introduce yourself in the chat, we can see where you are now. And if you have any questions that you're thinking up, by all means, put those there. That's just before we get started. We'll be getting going in a moment or two. So, welcome to this webinar, AP Automation Trends of 2022, comparing the latest responses and state of play in finance teams with what the situation was in a 2019 survey. We know the world has changed a lot since then, and what's been the result for finance. The research carried out by IFOL with Tipalti has some clear insights into what's going on, and we've got the very latest research, which isn't complete yet. So if you want to take part in it, you can go to the IFOL website and find the links there, and you can give your responses, which would be greatly appreciated. So we'll be providing you with a guide following this session to what's being said today, so no need to make any notes. And as I said, any questions you have, please put them in chat. We'll do our best to pick them up, and we'll be running a couple of polls, so please join in those. I'm Sue Beardsmore. Today I'm joined by our experts, Patrick Wetzels, a regular IFOL guest speaker, director of Quick Consulting Limited, which specialises in finance and innovative tech. He's over 20 years experience in corporate finance, working with some of the largest corporations and SME businesses, skilled in project management, team development, finance processes, shared services and finance systems, and a self-proclaimed blockchain and AI enthusiast. Hi, Patrick.
Hello.
Rob Israq, president of Tipalti, a leading company globally developing accounts payable automation software. Welcome, Rob. If you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about Tipalti.
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Rob Israq, as Sue mentioned, president of Tipalti. I've been with the company for about 8 years, so I've seen us go from about 20 employees to 1,000 in a relatively short time. So, and I'm calling you out from London. In terms of Tipalti, essentially our mission is to free finance to focus on making impact, guiding their company. We do that with end-to-end AP automation technology that kind of takes the whole spectrum of supplier management, PO management, invoice management, PO matching, and payments as well. We're actually FCA licensed all the way down to reconciliation. So we take a more holistic viewpoint, and the output of that is typically workload reduction around 80%, 25% accelerated monthly close, and then strengthened cost and risk controls in your business. We did launch with that FCA license last September, about a year ago, and so we've got about over 100 customers in the UK now. Companies like Kazoo, Hopin, Time Out, Food Hub, and many others, and that goes along with our 2,500 customers. So happy to join you today, and that's a little, I think, hopefully a little overview of Tipalti.
Thanks very much indeed, Rob. Certainly a holistic view by the sound of it. We'll be looking forward to hearing your insights. Thanks a lot. Now, before we go any further, we've got a quick poll for you, and this is: how many hours a week does your finance team spend processing invoices and administering supplier payments? So how many hours a week does your finance team spend processing invoices and administering supplier payments? Just one answer, please. Less than an hour a week, between 1 and 5 hours a week, between 5 and 10 hours a week, and over 10 hours a week. So if you could put yourself in the category that you think you might belong to, we'll have a look at that and see if it tallies with what everybody's expecting. It'll certainly be a talking point, because some of the research is very different from a while ago, and some is very similar to a while ago. So how many hours a week does your finance team spend processing invoices and administering supplier payments? Single answer: less than an hour a week, between 1 and 5, between 5 and 10, and over 10 hours a week. So I'm going to end that and show you the results. So everybody spends more than an hour a week, and 50% over 10 hours a week. So is that what you'd be expecting, Rob?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Some data says over 5 hours. We typically hear from companies about 40 hours a month, so it's pretty right on the ball from what we've seen.
And you wouldn't disagree with that, Patrick? That's what you'd expect people to be spending.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. That's what that's what I see. As well with clients, and also, there what was another stat that I picked out, which gave pretty much that same number.
Okay, before we look at the current research and what you're finding has happened after the last 2 very strange years, a quick look back at the AP automation trends from previous years. So recap on how and why the adoption of automation has been accelerated, because since COVID and everybody working at home, I mean, we've discussed this many times, it always has, but can you put a few more reasons together why you think it's happening? Rob, would you like to go first?
I mean, I think the biggest reason is, of course, people talk about automation, but when you want to apply automation, you typically apply it to those areas that are the most time consuming, and a variety of research data points very consistently, whether you're asking an FD, a controller, CFO, consistently point out that AP is the most time consuming function of finance. And even the number 2 most time consuming function of finance is usually monthly close. And monthly close, of course, is tied to payment reconciliation, which if you do AP properly, including payments, you address a lot of that pain as well. So I think, when you just logically look at automation ties to time, and if that's the most time consuming function, and it even helps the second and third most time consuming function, then it's logical for that to be an area that gets addressed as a priority.
And we know that a lot of people had to move into it when everybody had to work from home, but what the rate of acceleration now, what's driving that? Because people are used to working at home, because they've seen some advantages to it? What's driving it?
I think certainly people have gotten experience with doing work in a digital perspective and from home, and gotten comfort level with that. So I think that certainly helps. And I think on top of that, both with technology getting stronger, AI, machine learning going alongside it, and then just it's difficult to retain, it's difficult to hire. So I think it's there's a marriage between the three that's causing that trend to accelerate.
Yeah, because of course the difficulty of attracting and retaining staff is a big thing everywhere, isn't it, at the moment? Patrick, what are your views on this?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a massive issue, and I think but because also there was also a statistic that I saw the other day, is that one of the reasons why there's such staff shortages is because people are actually retiring. So that means that there are just less available professionals to do to do the work. So that means that that's really where automation has to kick in. But I think also next to that, there's a really good motive and a really good reason to also automate, and that's the first time right principle. And it's like one of the things that not everyone might know is that every entry error will cost you between 10 to 12 times the amount of the actual mistake. So I think those two combined make a massive reason to automate and to really eradicate errors at the entry point, plus also making sure that you are that you're ready for a future where your workforce will just be smaller.
Okay. Now, of course, we talk about AP generally, but I mean, it's complicated. There's many different processes involved. Which part of the processes are the first hits to be automated? What are you finding, Rob?
I think the first thing everyone thinks of is invoice processing, is what's typically known as OCR, optical character recognition. I think that is actually changing quite a bit, and some of the research out there indicates that much, but it's a fairly oversimplified potentially way of looking at the problem. You also have things like invoice approvals, PO matching, purchase requisitions, and the such surrounding it. So I think the mindset is starting to change from that, but it usually starts with invoice processing, and I think the historical perspective has been much more OCR tied, but that as the pain matures and people get more and more used to technology and the different alternatives, they're kind of starting to look at the problem a little bit more fully. And so, but it does start with that invoice process, and then it usually moves to things like payments or supplier management or other process, from my experience.
So Patrick, looking back slightly as we are at the moment, before we look at the new research, which areas would you agree with Rob? Do you find other areas that people want to automate?
I completely agree with everything that Rob just said. I would probably put it even slightly before that, and it starts with master data. It's really like master data is something that it sounds very boring, but it's so important. That's where a lot of errors are being made. And so that means that if that process if that's not a set process, if that's not something that you've tackled as a complete organization, because that's normally something that falls between the cracks. No one really wants to do it, and no one really feels responsible. But it's a massive driver for errors. So I would even put that before the invoice.
Okay, let's move on now. That's a bit of the background. Some of the things have come up before, obviously, but let's look at the trends that are being identified in the current research and maybe discuss what's changing, what hasn't changed, what stubbornly refuses to change in a way in the world. So let's have a look at, first of all, shall we take the level at which most companies are automating their AP processes? Typically, what do people get involved in? Because it's not a wholesale piece of work at once, is it, Patrick? What are your clients looking at?
Well, it's really the main thing is really getting things right the first time. That's a real massive one. So indeed, that's where the scanning software comes in, and to actually have smart scanning software, because there are loads of systems out there, but something that will actually where there's an actual machine learning element in it, a system that's not, and that's actually learning, that's getting that. You can also look at things like blockchain to actually get your master data right, and actually get your master data from source, rather than having someone in your organization trying to key it all in. So I think those are real massive areas. I think before you even start to process it, it's all about getting the basics right, and that's what I see my clients really putting a lot of time and effort into.
Okay, Rob, what would you say the levels at which most companies are automating their AP processes?
I know from the data, it definitely indicates that there's a pretty good chunk, 40% or so, that are not automating at all. There's a partial automation is about a fourth of the market, and then there's a third that's saying they're mostly automated. Still probably mostly might not be entirely. It may not include that vendor master record that Patrick's discussing, which I think is on the latter side of adoption, but people are starting to tie these things together and realize, oh, your payment errors rates triple if you don't get that fixed up front. But I think the thing that's encouraging in the data that's starting to come out is that mostly automated group has multiplied quite a bit. So it's 2 to 3x what it was last year. And so it's indicating that at least people are taking a much more comprehensive perspective of it than in the past, where it was much more largely either no automation or partial automation. And so it's heading the right direction, I think, from that perspective.
One of the things that I noticed was that although the numbers of people saying they're partially automated, they're going to be automated, they're whatever, that 56% of the people responding said they spent more than 10 hours a week processing invoices and administering supplier payments. And there was another statistic that showed a lot are actually manually inputting stuff still. I mean, the statistics don't tie up. Are they because they're exceptions? So they'd like to be more automated than they are, but there's always exceptions that have to be dealt with differently. What's causing that?
If they're still spending 10 hours a week doing it, while they might have applied some technology, they probably haven't applied it properly, frankly. And so, everything from, what Patrick talked about with the supplier master record and making sure you're validating the payment information up front, the VAT checking, PO matching and purchase requisitions, payments, which is, part of that question you just said is payments. And most people end up, the data also indicates that the average number of bank portals people are using is 4 or more, which is pretty mind-boggling. You're going to get more errors, and if you're jumping around to 4 or 5 different portals over the course of time. So it also indicates that actually has been streamlined along with those other parts of the process that precede it. And if not, you're probably it probably explains why people are still spending 40 hours a month.
Yeah.
Despite some automation progress that's being made.
Okay, so if somebody came to you and said, look, I looked at it all, I thought automation was the way to go, we've done this, and it's frankly not working as well as we'd hoped, what areas would you look at? What would you tell them to check it? I mean, you've run through a few, but if somebody just came to you cold and said, right, this is what we've done, what do we need to do now to make sure we're getting the best out of it?
I think there too much data entry still. When everyone's asked about their pain in financial operations and AP, it comes down to data entry. And if you have 4 or 5 different processes or systems, or your entities are using different systems than your HQ or processes, essentially the processes and the people and the systems aren't talking to one another, and that results in data entry. And so that's likely the culprit from my perspective.
Patrick, what would you advise people to look at first if things weren't going as well as they'd hoped?
I would say do not see the solution or the system as the golden nugget. It's really it sounds really boring and really cliche, but it starts with your own processes. If your processes are wrong, and then you can't expect the system to fix it. It will help, but it won't fix it at the root cause. And so I've been with so many clients who don't have a purchase order in place. If then you're bound to end up with having to manually key in invoices. It's really that simple, and it's a difficult process because the organization typically within the operation typically don't want to do POs, but it's essential if you want to get your AP process right.
Notwithstanding those, shall we call them teething troubles, till people understand what they need to be doing, is AP automation still a priority from the research that the response that you've found, Rob? Is it still a priority for most finance leaders?
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly every indicator indicates it's accelerating. I think it goes back to a little bit of what was touched on before with the people side of the problem. It's not there's certainly a lack of there's a retention challenge, and then a lack of supply to replace people who leave. I think there's also the mindset of, so if one group's retiring, you've got another group that you're filling it in, and their mindset and their willingness to do data entry and to run processes and then stay with the company with the millennial and newer generation. If you want to keep that finance talent and grow them, they're unlikely to be very patient, and they also are likely to want to use some level of technology to improve their skills so they can grow, and then focus on other areas of AP and finance where they feel like they're adding more value to the business. And so the data indicates that it's certainly accelerating in terms of adoption rate. And I think part of that comes back down to the pain of losing people and replacing people. And then when you replace them, they're not going to be particularly patient with an outdated process with a lot of manual pieces. And then you'll go through that same circular retention challenge again.
But is the good nugget in there that perhaps new people coming through are happy to look at the job, the work, the process in a different way, so they're all for embracing what they need to embrace to make this work? And I think the research was showing that they were interested in what that could mean for their roles.
Yeah, 100%. There's a fresh set of eyes that are willing to look at the process and see how it can be done differently in the future. And some of the projects you see out there are actually being initiated by your up and coming staff members who are more familiar with the modern techniques out there and such like that. So 100%.
And let's have a look now, both Patrick and you, Rob, on the areas. We've talked about the main areas, the things that need really doing, but what other areas are people moving into to automate? What are there any surprises? Is the research now showing that people are saying, oh yeah, we could do it in this area or that area? What are you finding?
Certainly, what Patrick hit on earlier with the vendor master record, certainly on the your traditional invoice side, I think they are looking at more broadly to include things like approvals and PO matching and purchase requisition. Certainly payments, and in the payments context, not just domestic payments, but global and cross-border payments, or in a multi-subsidiary type scenario, looking at it from that perspective, and certainly connecting the dots of AP and how it ties to the monthly close and the such. So it's just kind of broadening out in terms of areas that people are realizing they can also automate beyond your typical processing side of things.
Patrick, what have you come across?
Yeah, no, that's that was a really good summary, Rob. The one thing that I would add is it's often there's a focus within the middle management of the middle management around AP who are dealing with it, so team leaders, etc. But it's often like the CEO, the CFOs, those are the people that don't really care. Typically, it's like that's just basically paperwork, and I think it's kind of there's a growing belief within those functions that AP automation will actually lead to a better process, to quicker insights into your results. And because if you're running your company very, very strictly on your numbers, and you have 400, 500, 600 invoices not posted, and you don't have a PO process in place so that you can see what's coming, then you're really staring blind, and I think that's a growing that's a growing belief. I think that's really going to help. So I can only really encourage people who are really in that middle management kind of level is to really get the message out there. Your CFO, your CEO, and your CFO need to really understand that this is a key part of their complete organization.
One of the things that struck me was quite a simple question, but clearly has big implications. Will AP teams be able to handle an increase in invoice volume? So you might be very comfortable doing what you're doing and think, I don't need to do any more. But if you're looking at big increases in volume, which presumably means more business, it was interesting in the responses there that a lot of people didn't feel comfortable that they would be able to do. So would you encourage people to automate on that basis? Patrick?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. No, indeed, absolutely. I mean, if you cannot cope with volume change, with the volume increase, then your process is wrong. Then whatever level of automation you think you have, it really isn't there. So and I think that's the thing is that a lot of times we talk about that things are really automated, but they're really semi-automated. Fully automated processes can cope with volume increase. So I think that's a really big red flag.
Yeah, and I think you've got to anticipate what your future growth is when you evaluate your processes and your systems. If you're only solving for what your processes and volumes, supplier count looks like today, or your business structure, and not trying to anticipate 2 or 3 years out and putting a system that can scale, it's problematic. I think the other piece of it is many companies, probably many people who are on the call, they're used to an ERP implementation. An ERP implementation can take 6 months to 9 months, or depending on the system, even longer. I think people are realizing as they're getting more and more experience, AP automation to implement even a holistic system takes 1 to 2 months. It's not in the same sphere of magnitude of effort as an ERP solution. So as people get more educated on that, you start then weighing the different pros, cons of should I automate and how far do I go and automate, that length of time it takes both to work on it and how to get that more modernized system in place. It's not as severe as what they may be used to from their ERP experience.
Also, Rob, on that, I would also add to that, if your company is going through, if you're doing an ERP implementation, that might be a great time to think about to basically add AP automation. You know, don't just slot in a bad process, you know, that you had. You know, that's a perfect time to do it, because often there's a lot of synergies, you know, between a project. I'm actually doing one right now where I'm both doing the actual ERP implementation and also adding to that the AP automation, because it's just much easier if you're ready to change everything anyway.
Can I ask, are there any, with your overview, Rob, sort of holistic, global, are there any global trends or differences that really show you, illuminate what's going on and why at the moment? Is there anything that you'd pick out of everything, or are things very different in different places?
So we've done some research where we compare and contrast regional, and so certainly in the UK and mainland Europe, there's a higher likelihood of cross-border payments and multi-subsidiary structures than the US. The US, you can, you know, there's many companies that may not have a supplier overseas or a subsidiary in another country. So that's certainly one trend it's been around. It's only, I'd say, accelerating, or the gap is a little widening from a regional perspective. I'd say that's the one that comes to mind.
Okay. And of course, you touched on, Patrick, that with technologies changing, things are becoming easier, simpler, more effective. So that's got to have an influence on what people are doing. Do people talk very much about sustainability? I mean, it's a hot topic in all areas of our lives. But is it something that comes up in people's thinking for changing, automating systems? Rob?
From a paper perspective, 100%. I think even in this research, it shows up that paper docs, paper files are being cited as a problem. So from that perspective, 100%. I think the terminology that's used in the media is a little different, but the use case of removing paper certainly is there. Okay,
Patrick.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, and it's in you know, indeed, and maybe not in those words, you know, but yeah, indeed, you know, but becoming paperless is obviously has a huge sustainability impact, but it also makes work remote easily, you know, and I think, you know, so, and I'm not too sure which of the two are at the front of the director's minds, but you know, but you know, but it really helps in both ways, and because it's also not just it's not just you know, the paper movement. It's also people are just traveling less. People are you know, people aren't driving in their cars. People aren't stepping into planes, and so you know, but whether it's a primary focus, I wouldn't dare to say that, but there is definitely an impact.
Not a main driver, but it does occur to people from time to time.
Yeah.
Shall we put it there?
Yes.
Before we move on to do a little bit before we go of crystal ball gazing, when I look at the statistics, there are still 21% of respondees say they have no plans to automate at all. So in turn, maybe starting with Patrick, what would you say to those people?
Well, that's going to be a problem. You know, it's really going to be. I mean, it also depends on the size of your company, to be honest. You know, but you know, but if once you start to grow, once you start to scale, you unless you want to employ an army of people, which has risks in so many ways, from a cost perspective, from a process perspective, from an error, from sustainability. There's so many reasons why what is going to be an issue. Yeah, no, I would absolutely recommend every company that's scaling and growing to really look at it.
And Rob, would you recommend everybody at least looks at it? What would you say?
I think everyone should at least consider, but to Patrick's point, if you have less than 100 invoices a month, maybe less than 100 payments, maybe the amount of challenge it provides to your business is not worth the investment at that point. But once you start passing that 100 invoices a month, 100 payments, maybe once you start seeing other complexities, there's regulatory risks, there's fraud risks, there's obviously cost controls that become important. If you're starting to go global, you have different entities and cross-border payments. As that volume ramps up, as the suppliers ramp up, as some of the regulatory or other complexities start scaling, it definitely starts becoming a clear point where you're essentially diverting resources and time that could be spent growing and innovating and essentially elevating finance to guide the business and make better strategic decisions to these manual processes that are not really value added. You could automate them. And generally, I mean, it's interesting because at 21%, if you take the other side of it, the average FD that's asked about automation, about 75% of them say that automation would free finance to work on more strategic projects. So it's almost the exact reverse of that, but 3/4 of finance leaders' mentality is already tied that way. And I kind of agree with Patrick that generally, if you at least a certain point of your maturity, if you're not looking at this and think of adopting it, it could hold the company back and the finance team back from making a bigger impact for the business.
So whatever stage you're at least be aware of what's going on. Thanks very much. Right, before we move on to our final little section, thinking what might happen, a quick poll. And this one, how would you describe the current state of the automation in your accounts payable department? And you again only have one choice: no automation, partially automated, mostly automated, or fully automated. A couple more minutes there to decide. How would you describe the current state of the automation in your accounts payable department? None, partially. Okay, so let me share that. As I think you would have expected, the partially, perhaps that will move on in the future to mostly. We'll have a think about that just now. Okay, thanks for joining in with that poll. And so future, what does the future look like? Which areas of the AP process will be a higher priority for 2023, do you reckon, gentlemen? Who wants to go first on that one? Oh, Rob.
All right, sure. If assigned. I think actually, just to pull it up a level, I think from a finance perspective, with AP as a part of it, I think the CEO, the board, the investors expect finance to help them get through the challenges we're going through. We just came out of COVID. Now there's inflation, recessionary challenges, and other challenges going on out there. And so they expect finance to help guide the business through this. And so I think the first trend will be, use finance as a real weapon for the business to make better decisions and get through this thing and come out right the other side. And that does mean, taking time that's being spent in some way, in other ways, including AP, and focusing on things like guiding the business through this. When there's a Gartner study out there that asks CFOs where they think finance is heading, and Patrick actually kind of alluded to this earlier, but data and visibility is number one, and that ties hand in hand with guiding the business to make better decisions. There's no one in the business that understands a version of truth and understands data better in the company, and finance leaders generally agree that that's where finance needs to go. But the number two thing, which a little bit of a contradiction, is they say finance needs to get better and help the business with data and visibility, but they also have to be leaner. And so it's a bit of a challenge. So I'd say that's kind of at least at the finance level where the company needs to and the organization needs to head.
Okay, we'll perhaps come back to the AP process again a little bit in a moment. But Patrick, the finance, future of office finance, where do you think it sits? 2023.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's it's the part where you want finance to really add value, and not, you don't want them to be crunching numbers, but to actually add value. And the added value is to actually become an advisor to actually there's no better steering information than if you have correct and accurate and timely financial data. That's when you can actually steer your company. And indeed, so and that's so hard if your numbers aren't complete, or if they aren't correct, and if you don't get them if you don't get them quicker. So I think real-time access to real-time access to accurate data, that's an absolute key thing for companies to have, and that's what they're all really struggling with. So that really, if you talk about the future, and if you kind of step aside from which system is going to do it, and whatever, but that's what companies want: real-time, immediate, correct, and complete information.
So that's the aim. What's happening that will make it be a reality? We've touched already on sort of new, more easy technologies, more quicker implementation. Do you think they will drive that requirement for accurate financial data as soon as next year? Do you think there are changes in the industry that means that that's actually going to ramp up and happen more? Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I think the tools actually are already out there to a large degree, between fintech technologies, between AI and machine learning, between the interlocking of things like ERP and AP automation, and the fact that systems can now talk to each other quite naturally and in relative real time. I think the tools are actually largely out there. They do keep getting easier to use, faster to implement, other modern interfaces and other technologies that make them more powerful, but largely it's all possible. It's just the internal prioritization and motivation, I'd say.
Okay, well, you talk about it's all possible and the art of it. What's the vision for Tipalti? You've been involved in the research. You've been growing your company at a strong rate. What's your vision?
Yeah, we talked about the holistic piece. Certainly in this environment, cost controls, we believe, are getting more important. So, purchase requisitions, even on the payment side, about, are you paying too many wire transfers? There's ways to use things like global ACH and other less costly payment methods, local bank transfers around the world and such, to reduce your costs. With the vendor master record, one of the outputs of a vendor master record is less payment errors, which saves time, but also saves bank fees. And so cost controls is definitely a trend. Globalization is absolutely a trend. And we've talked about data and visibility, so accelerating that monthly close, as well as other ways to get better insight into your invoice processing times and supplier payment times. I think generally, though, even some things we've talked about with supplier management, or intercompany transfers and FX hedging type services, that wouldn't typically be seen as AP, and it's a bit of the challenge that Patrick talked about with, like, the vendor master record, where does that sit functionally? But I do think over time, finance they have to solve a general problem in terms of where they're going strategically and how they help the business while helping their business be more efficient, which includes finance. And so I think over time, you'll get even more of that obscuring of boundaries, where they'll just start looking at the finance operation in general, and looking at ways to streamline it and make it more efficient, so that the talent in finance can focus on what they do need to focus on to help their businesses succeed.
Okay. And Patrick, would you go along with that? Do you have other things that you would like to see people focusing on in 2023? What's your view?
Well, absolutely. No, and I think Rob hit all the right notes there. So it's difficult for me to really add to that. But what I would like companies to really focus on, and that's what I see with every client that I'm at, is to really dig into your processes, really review your basic processes. If your basic processes are wrong, your system is not going to fix them. It's going to help, it's not going to fix them. And I think that's where it's really the same as, and a finance department isn't any different than from any kind of, if you start to actually manufacture, and if you have a plant, it's the same thing. Something has to roll through certain processes, and you can put a machine there, but if that's sitting at the wrong place in the line, it won't do anything. It will actually create more backlog. So and I think, and that's something to really think of, like think through the get your purchase requisitions in place, get clean master data, good master data, and get a process to do that more easily. And really cut the waste. There's a lot of waste in basic processes. So so that's something I really encourage companies to focus at, because don't, and I will say this over and over again, don't look at the system as the big golden nugget. It just won't fix your problems. So yeah, that's just really something that companies have to focus on. Have a strategy in place to get that done in 2023, and your life will be a lot better. and then also add a system to it which will then automate something that's good in the basic process anyway.
Okay, because noting from the research in 2019 to the current research, the top 3 issues in 2021 caused by delayed processes were damaged vendor-supplier relationship, delayed delivery of goods or services from vendor supplier, stress on the AP team. And of all the changes and all the things, they had not changed. They were the same top 3 issues then, there's top 3 issues now, and you can probably think they might be the top 3 issues next year. So it's trying to address those things, isn't it, really? Just before we finish, we should reflect that there are different automation needs in different settings. I mean, yeah. You've alluded to it, but does that mean that people, if they think one thing's not for them, that doesn't mean that there isn't something else that could help their business if they looked at it in a different way? Do you want a word on that, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a variety of technology and systems out there. It goes back to exactly what Patrick said, like understand your process and your business, as well as where your business is going a few years out, trying to anticipate that as best as you can. And once you've mapped out those processes, you understand what the friction points are, the challenges, and the requirements you need to unlock. So technology is just an enabler, and there is plenty of different technology that, depending on your industry, your use case, your scenarios, your challenges, you should be able to learn how to apply. You'll probably also just identify process optimizations and other types of improvements that may or may not relate to technology, but the practice of mapping out the process and evaluating kind of what you need, and then technology is just applied to help along the way, along with other best practices and improvements.
Patrick, quick final word from you.
Yeah, the only thing I can add to this, indeed, identify the bottlenecks in the process, and that's where you need to focus, and that's where the automation can really help once you fix that bottleneck.
Thank you both very much indeed. So thanks to Patrick Wetzels and Rob Israq from Tipalti. Thanks for joining us, you out there. There's more information for membership of IFOL and courses on the website. And this year's research is still not quite closed. So if you could respond and help with it, please go to the website and join in. This webinar will be available on demand on the IFOL website from tomorrow. So please share with colleagues, and we'll be sending a link to a guide to today's session. Thanks again for joining us, and thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.